Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto's Chaquetrix scanned a Saiyan, a god, and a dragon. Naruto x Gwen Tennyson, Ben 10. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Dimensional Fault Lines. The air crackled with static electricity as Naruto crouched among the dense foliage, cerulean eyes narrowed at the abandoned research facility below. Moonlight cast elongated shadows across the clearing, giving the decrepit building an ethereal, almost sinister appearance. 3 years had passed since the end of the Fourth Shinobi War, and while peace reigned across most of the 5 great nations, intelligence reports of strange energy fluctuations had brought him to this remote location on the border between the land of fire and the land of sound. "Talk to me, Shikamaru," Naruto whispered into his communication device, a recent innovation from the Scientific Ninja Tools division that allowed for long-distance coordination. Troublesome as always, came the lazy drawl of his strategist. "Sensors indicate the energy signature is growing stronger. Whatever's causing these anomalies is definitely inside that facility. Approach with caution. We have no idea what Orochimaru might have left behind." Naruto rolled his shoulders, feeling the comfortable weight of his modified Jonin vest. At 20, he'd grown into his power and reputation. The whisker marks and his cheeks seemed more pronounced against his tanned skin, and his blonde hair, longer now and partially tied back, swayed gently in the night breeze. "Roger that." Going in silent, he channeled Chakra to his feet and launched himself in a controlled arc over the fence line, landing without a sound on the cracked concrete below. Years of training had refined his movements to liquid precision. Gone was the brash, loud-mouthed kid who announced his presence to enemies with dramatic declarations. This Naruto moved like a shadow, each step calculated and efficient. The facility's entrance loomed before him, steel doors hanging partially off their hinges. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't been a peaceful abandonment. Scorch marks surrounded a jagged hole where the locking mechanism should have been. "Someone beat us here," Naruto observed, running his fingers along the melted edge of the metal. "Recent too. The oxidation hasn't fully set in. Can you identify the method?" Shikamaru asked. "Not like any jutsu I recognize." Naruto crouched, examining the unusual pattern of the damage. "Almost looks mechanical, like some kind of energy weapon." Drawing a 3-pronged kunai, one of his father's specialized weapons that he'd mastered using over the years, Naruto slipped through the gap and into the darkness beyond. The air inside was dense with dust and the metallic tang of deteriorating equipment. His enhanced senses, courtesy of Kurama, detected subtle shifts in the atmosphere, ions dancing in patterns that felt wrong somehow, as if the very fabric of reality was stretched thin. "The energy readings are off the charts," Shikamaru's voice crackled through the communicator. "Whatever it is, it's putting out more power than a tailed beast. Be ready for anything." Naruto navigated through corridors lined with shattered glass containers and overturned research equipment. The facility had clearly been dedicated to some sort of biological or chakra experimentation. Faded labels on doors indicated research divisions, genetic modification, dimensional energy, chakra transference. The last one caught his attention. Dimensional energy. The door to this section hung partially open, and unlike the others, a faint blue glow emanated from within. As Naruto approached, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and he felt a familiar sensation in his stomach. The nervous anticipation that preceded something momentous. "I think I found it," he whispered, pushing the door open with the tip of his kunai. The room beyond was mostly intact, dominated by a circular platform in its center. Surrounding this platform were monitoring stations with cracked screens still flickering with data. But what immediately drew Naruto's attention was the source of the blue glow, a small device hovering inches above a containment field in the center of the platform. It was unlike anything he'd seen before. A sleek, metallic object roughly the size of his palm, shaped like a hexagon with a circular depression in its center. The device pulsed with energy, each throb sending ripples through the air like stones dropped in a still pond. "Shikamaru, are you seeing this?" Naruto activated the visual feed on his communicator. "What in the?" Shikamaru's voice trailed off. "That's not one of Orochimaru's creations. The design is, I don't know, it doesn't look like anything produced in the 5 nations. Can you get a closer look without touching it? Naruto approached cautiously, circling the platform. Strange symbols were etched into the metal of both the Chi form and the device itself. Not Fuinjutsu or any written language he recognized, but something alien and complex. There's some kind of writing, but I don't recognize it. The device seems to be S words cut short as the blue glow suddenly intensified, the device spinning rapidly in place. The monitors around the room flared to life, data streams scrolling faster than the eye could follow. Naruto, get out of there. Shikamaru's voice was urgent. The energy readings are becoming unstable. But before Naruto could react, the device shot upward, hovering at eye level. A beam of light projected from its center, scanning him from head to toe. DNA sequence identified, announced a mechanical voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Compatibility confirmed. Initializing bonding process. What the? Naruto had barely formed the thought when the device suddenly shot toward him, attaching itself to his right wrist with a metallic snap. Pain lanced up his arm as microscopic filaments penetrated his skin, integrating with his nervous system. Shikamaru. Naruto grunted through clenched teeth, dropping to one knee as the device began to transform, reshaping itself into a sleek, watch-like apparatus that encircled his wrist. Something's happening. The room around him began to distort, reality itself seeming to bend and warp. The blue glow expanded outward from the device, from what it had become on his wrist, enveloping him in crackling energy. Chaquetrix activation complete, the mechanical voice announced. Dimensional gate opening. Prepare for transition. Naruto, your chakra signature is fluctuating. What's? Shikamaru's voice dissolved into static as the world around Naruto shattered like glass. He was flying, through a tunnel of light and color that defied description. His body felt simultaneously compressed to the size of an atom and expanded across infinite space. Through the maelstrom of sensation, he could feel the device, the Chaquetrix, pulsing against his skin, somehow anchoring him to reality even as it tore him away from it. Time lost all meaning in the dimensional corridor. It could have been seconds or centuries before Naruto felt a shift in the chaotic energies surrounding him. Ahead, 3 distinct pathways emerged in the tunnel, one blazing with golden light, another pulsing with divine silver energy, and a third swirling with ancient primal power. The Chaquetrix pulled him forward, and Naruto found himself hurtling down all 3 paths simultaneously, an impossible sensation of being in 3 places at once. Witnessing 3 different realities. In the first path, he glimpsed a muscular man with spiky black hair locked in combat against a pale, lizard-like being. The sheer power radiating from Ire battle was unlike anything Naruto had ever felt, pure physical energy that made the earth itself tremble. The black-haired warrior's aura flared golden as he unleashed a devastating attack, screaming words Naruto couldn't comprehend. In the second path, he beheld an enormous being of light and darkness, slumbering in what appeared to be the space between stars. Its form shifted constantly, sometimes humanoid, sometimes something utterly beyond comprehension. Even in sleep, its power radiated outward, maintaining and reshaping reality around it. The third path revealed an immense dragon I led around a mountain that dwarfed any peak in the elemental nations. Its scales shimmered with every color imaginable and some that shouldn't exist. Ancient wisdom emanated from its partially opened eye, which seemed to look directly at Naruto as he passed. The Chaquetrix glowed brightly, and 3 beams of light shot from it, one to each of the beings. Naruto felt information flooding into the device. Complex patterns of energy and genetic material, knowledge and power beyond human understanding. The device grew hot against his skin, nearly burning as it processed the immense data it was collecting. Warning. Multiple high-level entity scans detected, the mechanical voice announced, now sounding strained. System overload imminent. Emergency protocol activated. The tunnel collapsed around him, the 3 paths merging violently into a chaotic vortex. Naruto felt himself being pulled apart and reassembled, molecule by molecule. The Chaquetrix pulsed once more, blindingly bright, then reality itself seemed to tear open. Naruto fell through darkness and crashed into solid ground. Pain shot through his body as he impacted what felt like concrete. Groaning, He pushed himself to his knees, blinking rapidly as his vision cleared. The Chaquetrix on his wrist had gone dormant, its surface now a matte black with a hexagonal display that pulsed with faint blue light. Where? He rasped, looking around at his surroundings. He was in an alley between tall buildings unlike any architecture he'd seen before. The structures soared impossibly high, made of glass and metal gleamed in the light of a setting sun. Strange mechanical objects moved on the street beyond the alley, carrying people within them. The air smelled of unfamiliar chemicals and foods, and the sound. A cacophony of noise that assaulted his enhanced senses. Definitely not the elemental nations, Naruto muttered, staggering to his feet. He checked his equipment. Kunai pouch still intact, scroll case secure, communicator, dead. The device showed no signs of power, not even static. Whatever dimensional jump he'd made had rendered it useless. Great, he sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Stranded in, wherever this is. The Chaquetrix suddenly beeped, its display lighting up with symbols similar to those he'd seen in the research facility. Dimensional coordinates logged, the mechanical voice stated, now emanating directly from the device. Home location saved as primary dimension. Current location. Dimension E117. Warning. Dimensional barriers unstable. Transitional integrity compromised. What does that mean? Naruto demanded, shaking his wrist as if that might extract clearer answers from the device. It means you just tore a hole in the fabric of reality. And from the readings I'm getting, it's not the only one. Naruto whirled around, kunai instantly in hand, to face the source of the new voice. Standing at the entrance to the alley was a young woman approximately his age. Her red hair fell in a cascade around a face set with determined green eyes. She wore a blue outfit with a black vest that seemed designed for both mobility and protection. Around her neck hung an amulet that pulsed with magical energy Naruto could sense even from a distance. Most striking, though, was her stance, balanced perfectly for either attack or defense, DS already glowing with pinkish-purple energy. This was no civilian but a trained fighter with abilities of her own. Who are you? Naruto asked, not lowering his weapon but not attacking either. RS of experience had taught him to assess before engaging. The redhead's eyes narrowed, her gaze flicking to the Chaquetrix on his wrist, then back to his face. I'm Gwen Tennyson, she replied, her voice firm but not openly hostile. Magister of Earth's Dimensional Security Division and someone who'd really like to know why you just punched a hole through the walls between worlds. She raised one glowing hand slightly. And more importantly, what you're doing with what looks like a modified Omnitrix. Naruto blinked, processing the unfamiliar terms. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, Jonin of Konohagakure. And I have no idea what an Omnitrix is, but this thing, he raised his wrist, is called a Chaquetrix. At least, that's what it calls itself. Gwen's expression shifted subtly, surprise followed by calculation. Konohagakure. That's not in our dimensional catalog. Her energy didn't dissipate, but she lowered her hand slightly. Look, whatever happened, you've arrived at a really bad time. The walls between dimensions have been weakening for weeks, and your arrival just caused a cascade of failures across 3 different sectors. As if to illustrate her point, the sky above them rippled like the surface of disturbed water. Colors shifting momentarily before settling back to normal. In the distance, a siren began to wail. That would be the dimensional breach alert, Gwen said grimly. And it means we have about 5 minutes before this area is swarming with plumbers and interdimensional security forces who will have a lot more questions than I do. Naruto weighed his options quickly. He was in an unknown world with unknown rules. His only potential ally was this woman who, despite her cautious stance, hadn't attacked him outright. Decision made, he slipped the kunai back into its holster in a deliberate, visible movement. I didn't mean to cause any problems. This device attached itself to me during a mission, and next thing I knew, I was tumbling through some kind of dimensional corridor. Gwen studied him for a long moment before the energy around her hands dissipated completely. The energy signature you're giving off is unusual. You're not fully human, are you? Naruto tensed. How could you? Magic user, she said simply, tapping her amulet. I can sense energies. You've got something powerful inside you, plus whatever that device is doing. She glanced at the street beyond the alley. Look, We don't have time for the full introduction. If you want to avoid being detained and probably dissected by overzealous interdimensional bureaucrats, you need to come with me now. Another ripple passed through the sky, this one lasting longer and accompanied by a deep, subsonic rumble that Naruto felt in his bones. The dimensional fractures are spreading, Gwen muttered. More to herself than to him. She extended a hand. Decision time, Naruto Uzumaki. Trust me or take your chances with the authorities. Naruto had always been good at reading people, a skill honed through years of determining who saw him as a person and who saw only the nine tails. Something in Gwen's direct gaze spoke of honor and competence. Besides, he reasoned, if she had wanted to attack or capture him, she could have tried already. He stepped forward and took her hand. Lead the way, Gwen Tennyson. A small smile flickered across her face. Smart choice. She pooh. LLED a small device from her pocket with her free hand. Hold on tight. Teleportation isn't pleasant the first time. Before Naruto could respond, she activated the device. The world around them dissolved into particles of light, and Naruto experienced the now familiar sensation of his body being taken apart and reassembled. Unlike the chaotic transition through the dimensional corridor, however, this felt controlled and precise. When reality solidified again, they were standing in what appeared to be a high-tech laboratory. Screens displaying complex data covered the walls, and equipment Naruto couldn't begin to identify hummed with power. Large windows revealed a view of a city at dusk, lights beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky. Welcome to my workspace, Gwen said, releasing his hand and moving immediately to one of the consoles. Temporary headquarters while I investigate the dimensional anomalies that started 3 weeks ago. Her fingers flew across the interface, bringing up displays showing what looked like maps overlaid with glowing points. Which, I'm guessing, might have something to do with that device on your wrist. Naruto approached cautiously, examining the displays. Though the symbols and language were unfamiliar, the patterns were clear enough. Something was happening at multiple points across whatever world this was. These are the breaches, he asked, pointing to the glowing spots. Gwen nodded, not looking up from her work. Tears in the dimensional fabric. Small at first, but growing. Your arrival caused a spike in activity. She pulled up another display showing a timeline of events. Whatever that device is, it's connected to the weakening barriers between dimensions. The Chaquetrix suddenly beeped again, its display lighting up with new symbols. Dimensional scan complete, it announced. Multiple breaches detected. Warning. Primary dimension isolated due to barrier instability. Return path temporarily unavailable. Naruto's heart sank. Temporarily unavailable. What does that mean? How long is temporarily? Interface compatible with local technology detected, the Chaquetrix continued, ignoring his questions. A beam of light shot from its display, connecting with Gwen's computer system. Data began flowing between them. Hey, Gwen exclaimed, stepping back as her screens filled with new information. What is it doing? I have no idea, Naruto admitted, staring at his wrist as the device continued its unauthorized data transfer. It has a mind of its own. The screens around them flickered, then stabili. Zed showing entirely new displays, three-dimensional models of what appeared to be the multiverse itself, countless tiny spheres connected by threads of light. Several of these connections were highlighted in red, pulsing ominously. Dimensional fault lines identified, the Chaquetrix stated. Critical failures detected in sectors 7, 12, and 18. Entity scan data processing complete. Integration at 33% capacity. Entity scan. Gwen turned to Naruto, one eyebrow raised. What exactly did this thing scan? Naruto described his journey through the dimensional corridor and the three beings he had witnessed, the warrior, the slumbering god, and the ancient dragon. Gwen's expression grew increasingly troubled as he spoke. This is bad, she said finally, turning back to examine the new data on her screens. If I'm interpreting this correctly, your Chaquetrix didn't just scan any three random beings, it specifically targeted three of the most powerful entities in their respective dimensions. Is that significant? Significant. Gwen gave a short, humorless laugh. It's catastrophic. Power like that creates ripples in the multiverse. By scanning them, this device has created connectio-ns between dimensions that were never meant to interact. It's like like driving spikes through the walls between worlds. The Chaquetrix beeped again. Entity data integration continuing. Saiyan genetic template at 42% integration. Divine essence template at 17% integration. Dragon archetype template at 26% integration. Naruto looked down at the device with growing concern. What does that mean, integration? As if in answer, a sensation like liquid fire suddenly coursed through his veins. He gasped, dropping to one knee as energy unlike anything he'd ever felt, different even from Kurama's chakra, surged through his body. His muscles tensed and bulged slightly, veins standing out against his skin. Naruto. Gwen was at his side instantly, one hand on his shoulder, the other hovering over the Chaquetrix. What's happening? I don't know, he managed through gritted teeth. It feels like power, too much. Inside his mindscape, Naruto felt Kurama stirring, the nine tails awakening to the strange energy invading their shared body. Kit, something's wrong, asterisk asterisk, the fox growled. This energy, it's not chakra. It's something else entirely. Saiyan genetic sequence partially activated. The Chaquetrix announced. Warning. Host physiology adjusting. Recommend controlled environment for first transformation. First transformation. Gwen echoed, eyes widening. It's trying to transform you. We need to stabilize it, now. She placed both hands on the Chaquetrix, her palms glowing with magical energy. Subditus Imperium, Restricto Potentia. The pink-purple light of her magic enveloped the device, and Naruto felt the burning sensation recede gradually. The energy didn't disappear but seemed to settle into a manageable flow rather than the overwhelming flood of before. That should hold it temporarily, Gwen said, breathing heavily from the effort. But I've only suppressed the manifestation, not stopped the integration process. Whatever this device is doing, it's rewriting parts of your genetic structure to accommodate these new power templates. Naruto stood shakily, flexing his hand and noting that even with Gwen's containment spell, he felt different. Stronger, somehow, with energy humming just beneath his skin, waiting to be released. Is that dangerous? He asked. I don't know, Gwen admitted, returning to her console to examine the data. It depends on your physical resilience and how compatible you are with the entities it scanned. I'm pretty resilient, Naruto said, thinking of his Uzumaki heritage and Kurama's presence. And I'm already used to containing powerful energy. Gwen gave him a curious look but didn't press for details. Well, that might work in your favor. The readings suggest your body is adapting to the changes rather than rejecting them. She pointed to a display showing what Naruto assumed was some kind of medical scan of his body. But this is uncharted territory. I've never seen anything like this device before, and I've encountered a lot of strange tech through my cousin's adventures. Your cousin, Gwen Tennyson, he wields the Omnitrix, a device that lets him transform into different alien species. She gestured to the Chaquetrix. That thing on your wrist seems similar in concept but different in execution. Instead of transforming you completely, it appears to be integrating aspects of the scanned entities into your own physiology. Naruto examined the device more carefully. Now that the initial panic had subsided, he noticed details he'd missed before. The hexagonal display showed 3 distinct sections, each currently dimmed but occasionally pulsing with energy: golden for the warrior, silver for the god, and a shifting prismatic light for the dragon. So I'm going to, what? Turn into these beings? Not exactly, from what I can tell, Gwen replied, studying the data. It looks more like you'll be able to channel their abilities while maintaining your base form. But the integration is still ongoing, so I can't say for certain. The Chaquetrix beeped softly. Integration process stabilizing. Estimated completion time, unknown. Warning. Dimensional instabilities increasing. Recommend locating dimensional anchor points to prevent further degradation. Dimensional anchor points. Naruto looked to Gwen for explanation. Natural focal points WH. Air dimensional boundaries are strongest, she said, already pulling up new displays. They act as pillars supporting the multiverse's structure. If we can reinforce them, it might slow the degradation of the barriers. A map appeared on the main screen, showing their current location with several points highlighted in various colors. There, Gwen pointed to a pulsing blue marker about 50 miles north of their position. That's the nearest anchor point. If the degradation pattern holds true to what I've been observing, it'll be experiencing fluctuations within the next 12 hours. Naruto nodded. Decision made. Then we should head there immediately. If this Chaquetrix caused the problem, maybe it can help fix it. It's not that simple, Gwen cautioned. We don't fully understand what this device is or how it works. Rushing in without preparation could make things worse. I understand caution, Naruto replied, but sometimes you have to act on instinct. Right now, my instinct says we don't have much time. As if confirming his words, the building suddenly trembled, a deep vibration that rattled equipment and sent loose items tumbling from shelves. Through the windows, they could see the sky rippling again. More violently this time, colors bleeding into one another like wet paint. Dimensional quake, Gwen said grimly, steadying herself against a console. They're getting stronger and more frequent. The trembling subsided, but a new alarm began to sound from Gwen's equipment. One of the displays showed a red alert indicator over the anchor point they'd just been discussing. The degradation is accelerating, she said, voice tight with concern. That anchor point is destabilizing faster than my models predicted. She looked at Naruto. Decision made. You're right, we need to move now. She quickly gathered equipment, stuffing various devices and what looked like spell components into a backpack. I have transportation that can get us there in under an hour. I have a faster way, Naruto said, an idea forming. At least, I think I do. He closed his eyes, focusing inward to his mindscape where Kurama waited. You're not seriously considering using my chakra in this state, are you? The fox asked, eyeing the strange energy now flowing through Naruto's chakra network alongside its own power. Not your chakra specifically, Naruto replied. But I need to know if you think my body can handle channeling Sage Mode with these new energies present. Kurama considered for a moment, his massive tail swishing thoughtfully. It's risky, but your Uzumaki life force is strong. And our connection is stable. The new energies seem to be integrating rather than competing with your existing power. I think you can manage it, but be careful. Naruto opened his eyes to find Gwen watching him curiously. You were talking to someone, she said. It wasn't a question. Long story, Naruto replied with a small smile. Let's just say I'm not alone in here, and my tenant thinks we can try something. Without further explanation, he sat cross-legged on the floor and brought his hands together in a familiar position. Closing his eyes, he reached out to the natural energy around him, and was immediately overwhelmed by the sheer amount present in this dimension. It was everywhere, flowing more freely and abundantly than in his home world. Carefully, he drew it in, balancing it with his own chakra and Kurama's. The familiar sensation of Sage Mode washed over him, but with a new twist, the Chaquetrix on his wrist pulsed in response. Its 3 sections glowing more brightly. When Naruto opened his eyes, Gwen gasped. The orange pigmentation had appeared around his eyes as expected, but now golden energy, similar to what he'd see. And surrounding the warrior in the dimensional corridor, crackled faintly across his skin. Your eyes, she said. They're different. Naruto couldn't see himself, but he could feel the change. His senses had expanded exponentially beyond even what Sage Mode normally granted him. He could perceive energy flows throughout the building, throughout the city beyond, and, most importantly, he could say the dimensional anchor point they needed to reach. I can take us there directly, he said, his voice carrying a subtle resonance it hadn't possessed before. But you'll need to trust me. Gwen hesitated only briefly before nodding. All right, what do you need me to do? Stand close to me, Naruto instructed, rising to his feet with fluid grace. She approached, and Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder. This might feel strange, he warned, but try to relax. Focusing on the anchor point he could now sense clearly, Naruto gathered his enhanced chakra and formed a modified version of his father's Flying Thunder God technique. Without the prepared markers, it would normally be impossible, but with Sage Mode amplified by whatever the Saiyan energy was doing, he could perceive and target locations at vast distances. Ready? He asked. Gwen nodded, her expression determined. The world blurred around them, colors streaking past as they moved at incomprehensible speed. Unlike the sea, chaotic dimensional travel or Gwen's teleportation, this was a controlled passage through physical space, albeit at velocities that should have been impossible. They materialized at the base of a mountain, a location far removed from the urban environment of Gwen's laboratory. Ancient trees surrounded them, their massive trunks covered in moss and lichen. The air was crisp and pure, filled with the scents of earth and growing things. But the natural beauty was marred by visible distortions in the air above them, like heat shimmer but more pronounced, with occasional flashes of other landscapes visible through the ripples. The anchor point, Gwen breathed, looking up at the mountain. It's inside there, near the peak. Naruto nodded, still maintaining his enhanced state. I can sense it, something powerful, pulsing like a heartbeat, but erratic. Weakening. How did you do that? Gwen asked, gesturing back the way they'd come. That wasn't teleportation. It was more like space-time manipulation, Naruto supplied. A technique based on one my father developed, but enhanced by whatever this is. He looked down at the glowing Chaquetrix. Gwen started to respond but was cut off by another tremor, more violent than the one they'd experienced in the lab. The ground beneath them cracked, a fissure opening up that glowed with otherworldly light. The degradation is accelerating, she shouted over the rumbling. We need to reach the anchor point now. Naruto didn't hesitate. He scooped Gwen up in his arms and launched them upward, channeling chakra to his feet to run vertically up the mountainside. His enhanced strength and speed made the ascent effortless, even with a passenger. Gwen clung to him, eyes wide as they scaled hundreds of feet in seconds. This is definitely not telekinesis, she remarked. Some kind of energy manipulation. Chakra, Naruto explained as they continued upward. Life energy that can be controlled and shaped. Everyone has it where I come from. Though some have more than others. They reached a plateau near the summit, and Naruto set Gwen down gently. Before them was the entrance to a cave, its mouth perfectly circular as if carved by tools. Though the weathering suggested great age. The anchor point is in there, Gwen said, approaching the entrance cautiously. I can feel it. Inside his mindscape, Kurama stirred uneasily. Kid, something's not right. There's another presence here. Naruto tensed, his enhanced senses scanning the area. We're not alone, he warned Gwen. Something's watching us. Gwen's hands immediately began to glow with magical energy. Hostile. Can't tell yet, Naruto replied, drawing a kunai. But powerful. They entered the cave together, moving carefully through the narrow entrance that soon opened into a vast chamber. The space was illuminated by crystals embedded in the walls and ceiling, casting prismatic light throughout the cavern. At its center stood a column of pure RGY, a swirling vortex of light that connected floor to ceiling, pulsing in an uneven rhythm. That's it, Gwen whispered. The anchor point. It's destabilizing. The column flickered erratically, sections of it fading momentarily before re-establishing themselves. With each fluctuation, the air around them seemed to thin, reality itself becoming less substantial. How do we stabilize it? Naruto asked. Before Gwen could answer, a voice echoed through the chamber, smooth, cultured, and undeniably menacing. You don't. You watch it collapse, along with all the tedious barriers between dimensions. From the shadows at the far side of the cavern stepped a figure that radiated power and malevolence. Tall and elegant in appearance, with pale skin and silver hair that fell to his shoulders, he newcomer wore armor of an unfamiliar design that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Most striking were his eyes, solid black except for purple irises that glowed with inner light. Vexus, Gwen hissed, her magical aura flaring brighter. I should have known you'd be involved in this. The figure, Vexus, smiled, revealing teeth too sharp to be human. Gwen Tennyson, how delightful to see you again. I see you've made a new friend. His gaze shifted to Naruto, focusing immediately on the Chaquetrix. And what a fascinating accessory he wears. Naruto felt a chill at the intensity of Vexus's interest in the device. You know what this is. Oh yes, Vexus purred, taking a step closer. The Chaquetrix, a brilliant piece of technology created by beings even I hesitate to cross. A device designed to sample and replicate the most fundamental aspects of power across dimensions. His smile widened. A device that was supposed to be mine. It was you, Gwen realized. You've been causing the dimensional weakening, trying to locate it. Guilty, Vexus admitted with a casual wave of his hand. Though I must say, the ease with which the barriers have been falling suggests they were already fragile. I merely applied pressure at the right points. The anchor point behind them flickered more violently, and a shockwave of energy pulsed outward, forcing both Naruto and Gwen to brace themselves. Vexus merely stood his ground, seemingly unaffected. You're destroying the multiverse, Gwen accused. Billions of lives across countless dimensions will be lost if the barriers collapse completely. An unfortunate side effect, Vexus agreed, his tone suggesting he found it anything but unfortunate. But necessary for my collection to be complete. The Chaquetrix is the final piece, a device capable of absorbing and replicating the power of dimensional guardians. Naruto glanced at Gwen, noting her shocked expression. Dimensional guardians, beings that maintain the balance between worlds. She explained quickly, immensely powerful entities that exist to protect the multiverse's structure. Like a dragon coiled around a mountain. Naruto asked, remember, one of the beings the Chaquetrix had scanned. Gwen's eyes widened. Exactly like that, the Chaquetrix didn't just scan any dragon, it scanned a guardian. Vexus clapped slowly. Very good. Yes, he device appears to have already sampled at least one guardian's essence. A promising start. His gaze hardened. But now I'll be taking it, and you, its current host, back to my collection. He raised a hand, and dark energy began to coalesce around it, forming into what looked like chains made of shadow and light. Dimensional bindings, Gwen warned, stepping in front of Naruto. Don't let them touch you. They'll trap you between worlds. She thrust her hands forward, chanting rapidly in a language Naruto didn't recognize. A shield of magenta energy formed between them and Vexus, just as He flung the shadow chains in their direction. The impact sent tremors through the shield, cracks appearing in its surface. Gwen grimaced with the effort of maintaining it. I can't hold this for long, she grunted. He's too strong. Inside, Naruto felt Kurama's power surge forth. Let me help, Kit. This creature threatens everything. Naruto nodded mentally and allowed Kurama's chakra to flow freely, integrating it with his sage mode and the emerging energies from the Chaquetrix. Golden chakra enveloped him, forming the familiar cloak but with new elements, streaks of silver and prisma. Tick light weaving through the golden energy. What are you doing? Gwen asked, watching the transformation with wide eyes. Improvising, Naruto replied, his voice now carrying multiple undertones. The different energy sources harmonized within him. He stepped forward, placing his hand on Gwen's shield and channeling his combined energy into it. The cracks sealed instantly, the shield growing stronger and brighter. Vexus's expression shifted from confident to concerned. Interesting, he murmured. You've already begun integrating the templates. Ahead of schedule, he redoubled his assault, the shadow chains multiplying and striking the shield from multiple angles. We need to stabilize the anchor point, Gwen shouted over the cacophony of energies colliding. If it fails completely, this entire dimension could collapse. Quote, Naruto assessed the situation quickly. The unstable column of energy behind them was their priority, but Vexus stood between them and escape. A direct confrontation would waste precious time they didn't have. Can you handle the anchor point if I deal with him? Naruto asked. Gwen nodded. I know the spell, but I'll need a few minutes uninterrupted. You'll get them, Naruto promised. With a surge of chakra, he created 5 shadow clones, each glowing with the same combined energy as the original. Vexus paused his assault, eyebrows rising in genuine surprise. Duplication. That's not part of any template I recognize. I'm full of surprises, Naruto replied with a grin that was pure Uzumaki confidence. At an unspoken signal, the clones burst into action, moving with impossible speed to flank Vexus from all sides. The original Naruto maintained his position beside Gwen, ready to defend her as she worked on the anchor point. Go, he urged her. I'll keep him busy. Gwen dropped the shield and dashed toward the column of energy, already beginning to trace complex patterns in the air with her glowing hands. Vexus snarled and tried to pursue her, but found himself surrounded by Naruto's clones, each attacking from a different angle with techniques that blended ninja arts with the new powers flowing through them. One clone deliver, Da punch enhanced with the Saiyan's strength, creating a shockwave that cracked the stone floor. Another channeled the divine energy to create a barrier that deflected Vexus's shadow chains. Impressive adaptation, Vexus admitted, his initial surprise giving way to calculated assessment. But ultimately futile. He made a complex gesture, and reality itself seemed to bend around him. The air rippled, and suddenly he was holding a weapon, a staff topped with a crystal that pulsed with the same energy as the weakening anchor point. A guardian scepter, he announced, swinging it in a wide arc. Where it passed, space itself tore open, revealing glimpses of other dimensions beyond. 2 of Naruto's clones were caught in the dimensional tear and simply ceased to exist, their energy dissipating with faint cries. Naruto felt their loss through his clone connection, not death as he understood it, but something worse. Complete erasure from reality. Kid, be careful, ***, Kurama warned. That weapon isn't just destroying the clones, it's removing them from existence entirely. I noticed, Naruto replied grimly, studying Vexus's movements and looking for weaknesses. Behind him, Gwen was chanting continuously, her hands weaving complex patterns as she worked to stabilize the anchor point. The erratic pulsing had slowed somewhat, but the column still flickered dangerously. You're running out of time, Vexus called, effortlessly dispatching another clone. This dimension will collapse soon, and when it does, the resulting cascade will weaken the remaining barriers enough for me to traverse them at will. He smiled coldly, though I would prefer to have the Chaquetrix before that happens. The last remaining clone engaged Vexus directly, attempting to create an opening for Naruto to act. It managed to land a solid kick to Vexus's midsection, sending him sliding backward several feet, the first sign that he wasn't completely invulnerable. Seizing the opportunity, Naruto formed a Rasengan in his palm. But unlike any he'd created before, the swirling sphere of chakra was infused with all 3 energies from the Chaquetrix, Golden Saiyan power providing raw force, c. Elver divine essence granting dimensional penetration, and prismatic dragon energy adding elemental mastery. Dimensional Rasengan, Naruto named it instinctively, the technique forming as if guided by knowledge beyond his own. He charged forward as his final clone dissipated under Vexus's attack. The collector turned just in time to see Naruto approaching and raised his scepter defensively. Fascinating, Vexus remarked, genuine interest in his voice despite the danger. You've already begun creating hybrid techniques. The integration is proceeding faster than anticipated. The Rasengan collided with the scepter, and for a moment, the 2 forces seemed equally matched. Naruto's improvised technique against Vexus's ancient weapon. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing, the Rasengan began to drill through the dimensional protections surrounding the scepter. Vexus's eyes widened in genuine alarm. Impossible. The Rasengan detonated, releasing a concentrated explosion of multidimensional energy. Vexus was flung backward, crashing into the cavern wall with enough force to embed him in the rock. His scepter, damaged but not destroyed, clattered to the ground halfway between them. Naruto didn't waste the opportunity. He dashed forward and kicked the scepter toward Gwen, who caught it without interrupting her spell. Perfect timing, she called, incorporating the scepter into her work. This is attuned to the anchor point's frequency. I can use it to stabilize the connection. She thrust the scepter into the pulsing column of energy, where it seemed to dissolve partially, becoming one with the anchor point itself. The erratic fluctuations immediately began to smooth out, the column growing brighter and more solid with each passing second. Vexus extracted himself from the wall, his perfect appearance now marred by damage. Dark fluid that might have been blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, and his armor was cracked in several places. You'll regret that, human, he snarled. All pretense of civility gone. No one damages my collection. He raised both hands, darkness gathering around them more intensely than before. The temperature in the cavern plummeted, frost forming instantly on the stone floor. Gwen, Naruto called, preparing another attack. Almost done, she replied, her voice strained with effort. The anchor point is stabilizing. But I need another minute to lock it in place. Vexus launched his attack. Not shadow chains this time, but what appeared to be tears in space itself, rips in reality that moved through the air like living weapons. Wherever they passed, matter simply ceased to exist, leaving perfect voids in their wake. Naruto dodged the first volley, his enhanced speed and reflexes allowing him to move faster than should have been possible. But Vexus was relentless, sending wave after wave of the dimensional tears in his direction. You can't evade forever, Vexus taunted. And each attack brings this dimension closer to collapse. He was right, Naruto realized. Each dimensional tear, even when it didn't hit a target, seemed to weaken the fabric of reality around them. The air was becoming thin, harder to breathe, and strange lights flickered at the edges of his vision. Time for a different approach. Focusing inward, Naruto fully embraced the dragon energy from the Chaquetrix for the first time. Prismatic light engulfed him, and he felt his consciousness expand beyond normal perception. Knowledge flowed into him, ancient wisdom regarding the nature of dimensions, the flow of elemental forces, the balance of existence itself. This power, Kurama sounded odd. It's older than the Sage of Six Paths, older than the Ten Tails itself. Guided by instinct and the dragon's ancient knowledge, Naruto began to move his hands in patterns that mirrored Gwen's magical gestures. Words in a language he'd never heard before but somehow understood perfectly flowed from his lips. "What are you doing?" Vexus demanded, a note of uncertainty entering his voice for the first time. Naruto didn't answer directly, continuing his incantation. The prismatic energy surrounding him intensified, spreading outward to encompass the entire cavern. Where it touched Vexus's dimensional tears, they simply dissolved, reintegrated into the fabric of reality. He's channeling guardian magic, Gwen realized, looking up from her work with the anchor point. The dragon essence in the Chaquetrix must include knowledge of dimensional maintenance. Vexus's expression shifted from uncertainty to alarm. "Stop him," he commanded. Though there was no one to obey the order, he redoubled his attacks, but each one was neutralized before it could reach its target. Naruto completed his incantation, bringing his hands together in a final seal. The prismatic energy condensed around him, then exploded outward in a perfect sphere that expanded to fill the entire cavern. Where it passed, reality seemed to knit itself back together. Dimensional tears sealing, fractured space becoming whole again. When it reached Vexus, he screamed, not in pain but in fury. His form began to flicker, becoming translucent. "This isn't over," he snarled as his body started to fade from view. "The Chaquetrix is mine by right. I'll find you again, across however many dimensions it takes." His gaze locked with Naruto's, hatred burning in his otherworldly eyes. "And next time, I'll be prepared for whatever tricks you've learned." With those words, he vanished completely, forcibly ejected from the dimension by Naruto's guardian magic. The moment Vexus disappeared, the ambient pressure in the cavern normalized. The anchor point, now stable and strong, pulsed with steady, healthy light. Gwen sagged with relief. Scepter now permanently integrated into the column of energy. That was, she trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. "Yeah," Naruto agreed, letting the prismatic energy recede as he approached her. "What exactly did I just do?" Gwen shook her head in amazement. "You performed guardian magic, dimensional maintenance of the highest order. The kind of power that's supposed to be exclusive to beings that have existed since the formation of the multiverse itself." She looked at the Chaquetrix with new respect and caution. That device didn't just scan a guardian's physical essence, it copied their fundamental knowledge and abilities. Which means you now have access to powers that could either repair or destroy the multiverse, depending on how you use them. Gwen's expression was serious. No wonder Vexus wants it so badly. With the Chaquetrix, he could collapse the barriers between all dimensions at once, creating the ultimate collection, every reality merged into one that he could rule. Naruto looked down at the device on his wrist. It had gone dormant again, its display showing only faint pulses of the three energies it had sampled. "So what now?" he asked. "I still need to find a way back to my dimension." "I can help with that," Gwen offered. "With the anchor point stabilized, the dimensional mapping equipment at my lab should be able to locate your home world." She hesitated. "But there's something else we need to consider." "What's that?" Vexus wasn't working alone, she said grimly. He's part of a larger organization, the Convergence Cult. They believe that all dimensions should be merged into one perfect reality. If they learn about the Chaquetrix and what it can do, they'll come after it, Naruto finished. "After me," Gwen nodded. "And they won't stop with just your dimension. They'll threaten every reality in the multiverse." Naruto absorbed this information, weighing his responsibilities to his home against this new, much larger threat. As a shinobi, his duty was to protect his village and the Land of Fire. But as the bearer of the Chaquetrix, it seemed his responsibility had expanded exponentially. Then I guess we'd better stop them. He said finally, his expression resolute. Find a way to repair the dimensional barriers and deal with this convergence cult before they can do any more damage. Gwen smiled, relief evident in her expression. I was hoping you'd say that. Multiversal threats are a bit much to handle alone, even for a Tennyson. Another tremor shook the cavern, milder than before but reminder that their work was far from complete. That felt different, Naruto observed. Not like the others. Aftershocks, Gwen explained. The dimensional fabric is still settling. We've stabilized this anchor point. But there are others that need attention. She pointed to the cave entrance. We should get back to the lab and assess the overall situation. As they moved to leave, the Chaquetrix suddenly activated again. Its display lighting up with new information. Integration process continuing, it announced. Current status. Saiyan template at 47%, Divine template at 21%, Dragon template at 32%. Warning. Additional dimensional breaches detected. Multiple entities traversing damaged barriers. Naruto and Gwen exchanged concerned glances. Looks like Vexus's activities have had consequences beyond what we've seen so far, Gwen said. If other beings are crossing dimensions through the weakened barriers, then we have more immediate problems than finding my way home, Naruto concluded. He flexed his hand, feeling the combined energies flowing through him, his own chakra, Kurama's power, and now the three new essences from the Chaquetrix. It was a strange sensation but not an unpleasant one, as if parts of himself that had always been missing were finally falling into place. Ready to save the multiverse? He asked with a confident grin that had once been reserved for promising to become Hokage. Gwen matched his expression with a determined smile of her own. Just another Tuesday for a Tennyson. Let's go. Together, they exited the cave, stepping out into a world that was just one small part of a vast, interconnected multiverse, a multiverse that was counting on them, whether it knew it yet or not. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Powers Unbound. Dawn painted. Gwen's laboratory in hues of amber and gold, the morning light streaming through reinforced windows. Naruto sat cross-legged on a training mat, breathing rhythmically as sweat beaded his forehead. 3 hours of meditation had yielded frustratingly minimal progress in understanding the Chaquetrix's abilities. Try focusing on the Saiyan energy specifically, Gwen suggested, monitoring readings from a tablet-like device. Dark circles beneath her eyes betrayed a night spent analyzing dimensional data rather than sleeping. The scans show it's the most integrated of the three templates. Naruto inhaled deeply, letting his awareness sink into the foreign power coursing through his chakra network. Unlike the familiar warm flow of his own energy or Kurama's wild, primal force, the Saiyan NCE felt explosive and barely contained, like lightning constantly seeking ground. It doesn't want to be controlled, he murmured, eyes still closed. It wants to be unleashed. That tracks with what little we know about Saiyans, Gwen replied, swiping through reference files on her screen. The records describe them as a warrior race with immense physical power and combat instincts. Their inner GY grows stronger through battle and recovery from injury. Naruto opened one eye. They get stronger after being hurt. Significantly stronger. It's called a Zenkai boost, a biological adaptation. That makes them nearly unstoppable in prolonged conflicts. Gwen set her tablet down, stretching arms cramped from hours of research. Which makes them either the perfect warriors or the perfect disasters, depending on your perspective. The Chaquetrix pulsed against Naruto's wrist, its triangular golden section glowing more intensely than the others. He felt his muscles respond involuntarily, tensing with potential energy. I think it's responding to my emotions, he observed, studying the device. When I feel challenged or threatened, the Saiyan template becomes more active. Gwen approached, crouching beside him to examine the Chaquetrix more closely. The proximity brought her scent to him, a blend of old books, ozone from her magic use, and something uniquely her own. His enhanced senses noted these details automatically. Another change since the device had bonded with him. Makes sense, she agreed, careful not to touch the device directly. Saiyans are emotional fighters. The IR power often manifests in response to rage, pride, or the need to protect. Naruto considered this, thinking back to his own history. That's not so different from how I've always fought. When my friends are in danger, When people I care about are threatened, that's when I've always found my greatest strength. A small smile curved Gwen's lips. Then maybe you're more compatible with this template than we thought. She stood, extending a hand to help him up. Come on. Theory can only take us so far. Let's try a practical application. Naruto accepted her hand, noting the calluses on her paw. Not the soft grip of a scholar but the hardened touch of someone experienced in both physical and magical combat. He respected that. In his world, the most knowledgeable shinobi were often those balanced study with practical experience. Gwen led him to an adjacent room that resembled a high-tech dojo. Reinforced walls surrounded a central sparring area marked with strange symbols. Various training implements, some recognizable, others completely alien, lined the perimeter. Welcome to my training space, she announced, activating a control panel near the entrance. The symbols on the floor illuminated with soft blue light, magically and technologically hardened to withstand extreme forces. My cousin Ben and I designed it for practicing with our more destructive abilities. Impressive, Naruto commented, genuinely appreciating the forethought. His own training grounds in Konoha had needed frequent repairs after particularly intense sessions. Gwen tapped several commands into the control panel. I'm setting up a simple combat scenario. Nothing too intense, just enough to trigger a controlled manifestation of the Saiyan abilities. The air in the center of the room shimmered, coalescing into humanoid shapes. Within seconds, 3 figures stood ready, training constructs made of light and solid energy. These are programmed with basic combat routines, Gwen explained, stepping back to observe. They'll adjust their skill level based on your performance. She crossed her arms, her expression turning serious. Try to focus on bringing out the Saiyan abilities specifically. We need to understand how they integrate with your natural fighting style. Naruto nodded, stepping into the sparring circle. The constructs immediately shifted into combat stances, surrounding him in a triangular formation. Begin, Gwen commanded. The first construct attacked without warning, launching a lightning-fast punch toward Naruto's head. He dodged instinctively, years of shinobi training taking over. The second and third constructs moved simultaneously, coming at him from opposite directions. Naruto responded with practiced efficiency, blocking one attack while vaulting over the third attacker. His movements were fluid and precise, the result of years spent honing his combat skills. You're fighting like a shinobi, Gwen called out. Try tapping into the Saiyan energy. Feel for the difference. Easier said than done, Naruto thought, narrowly avoiding a sweeping kick. The constructs were surprisingly fast, adjusting to his rhythm and working together with coordinated precision. He ducked another attack and created 2 shadow clones in a puff of smoke, flanking his opponents. The constructs paused momentarily, recalculating to address the new threats, then attacked with increased intensity. One clone was dispatched quickly, dissipating as a construct's palm strike connected with its chest. The second lasted longer, managing to land several solid hits before being overwhelmed. Through it all, Naruto focused inward, trying to access the golden energy he'd felt during their encounter with Vexus. He could sense it there, pulsing beneath his normal chakra flow. But it remained frustratingly out of reach, like trying to grab smoke with his bare hands. A construct's kick connected with his ribs, sending him skidding across the floor. The impact wasn't particularly painful. The constructs were calibrated for training rather than serious damage, but the sudden shock triggered something unexpected. Heat flooded his system, starting at the Chaquetrix and radiating through his entire body. His vision sharpened dramatically, time seeming to slow around him. The constructs, which had appeared fast before, now moved as if through water. There it is, Gwen whispered, observing the golden aura beginning to manifest around Naruto's form. The monitors on the wall displayed rapidly changing readings as his power levels spiked. Naruto felt it too, raw, primal strength flooding his muscles. His body seemed lighter yet more solid simultaneously, as if gravity's hold on him had weakened while his physical presence had intensified. The nearest construct launched another attack. This time, instead of dodging, Naruto simply raised his hand and caught the incoming fist. The construct's momentum halted completely, its energy form rippling from the abrupt stop. Whoa, Naruto breathed, surprised by his own strength. Acting on instinct rather than conscious thought, he countered with a punch of his own. The construct didn't just fall back, it shattered completely, dissolving into particles of light that scattered across the room. Naruto stared at his fist in shock, the golden aura around it pulsing brighter. Well, that's definitely Saiyan strength, Gwen remarked dryly, making adjustments to her controls. Let's increase the durability factor on the remaining constructs. The two remaining figures glowed briefly, their forms becoming more solid. They circled Naruto cautiously, analyzing his new capabilities. How does it feel? Gwen asked, carefully monitoring the energy readings. Strange, Naruto replied, examining the golden energy surrounding his hands. Powerful but angry somehow, like it wants to destroy, not just defeat. Saiyans were born warriors. Combat was central to their culture, Gwen explained. Try directing it, not just containing it. The constructs attacked simultaneously. This time, Naruto didn't try to resist the Saiyan energy flowing through him. Instead, he channeled it deliberately, combining it with his own combat instincts. The result was explosive. He moved with blinding speed, appearing behind one construct before it could complete its attack. A precisely aimed strike to its core took it down without completely destroying it. Progress in control. The final construct managed to land a glancing blow to his shoulder, but Naruto barely felt it. He countered with a sweeping kick enhanced by the golden energy, sending the construct flying into the reinforced wall where it dissipated on impact. Better, Gwen acknowledged, deactivating the training program. You're integrating the strength and speed. But there's more to Saiyan abilities than physical enhancement. Naruto flexed his fingers, feeling the power gradually receding now that the immediate threat had passed. Like what? Energy projection, flight, sensory enhancement, Gwen listed, approaching him with a new readout on her tablet. The scans suggest you should be capable of. A piercing alarm cut her off, red lights flashing throughout the laboratory. The monitors on the wall switched automatically to display a map of the city, multiple red dots pulsing at various locations. Dimensional incursions, Gwen explained tersely. Rushing to the main console, her fingers flew across the interface, bringing up detailed readings of each breach. The anchor point stabilization must have redistributed the pressure to weaker points in the dimensional fabric. Quote, Naruto joined her, studying the display. How bad? Bad enough. Gwen's expression was grim. Multiple entities crossing over, some small, but these three. She indicated larger signatures near the city center, are putting out serious power readings. The building trembled slightly as a distant explosion echoed through the morning air. Through the windows, they could see smoke rising from downtown. Looks like we're continuing your training in the field, Gwen said, already gathering equipment. She slipped on a specialized jacket with various pouches and holsters, each containing magical components or technological devices. Naruto nodded, his expression setting into determined lines. Better than meditation anyway. Your enthusiasm for potential disaster is concerning, Gwen remarked, though a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She tossed him a small earpiece. Communication device. It'll translate automatically if we encounter beings speaking non-Earth languages. Naruto caught it one-handed and fitted it to his ear. What's the plan? We split up to contain the smaller incursions, then rendezvous to handle the larger threats together. Gwen activated her own communicator, syncing it with his. I'll take the northern breaches. My magical barriers should be effective against the entities showing up there. You head down, own and deal with whatever's causing those explosions. Divide and conquer, Naruto agreed. Just like a standard mission deployment. Except we're dealing with interdimensional beings with unknown capabilities, Gwen added. Her tone wry. She hesitated, then placed a hand on his arm. Be careful, Naruto. You're still adjusting to the Chaquetrix's powers. Don't push too far too fast. The genuine concern in her voice caught him slightly off guard. They'd known each other less than 24 hours, yet already a connection had formed between them, forged in shared danger and mutual respect. I'll be fine, he assured her, covering her hand with his own briefly. This won't be my first battle against beings with strange powers. Just remember, if you encounter something beyond your current capabilities, there's no shame in tactical retreat. We rendezvous at City Center Park in 1 hour, or sooner if either of us wraps up quickly. Naruto grinned, the expression reminiscent of his younger, more impulsive self. 1 hour. I'll see you in 30 minutes. Before Gwen could respond, he was gone, moving with such speed that the papers on a nearby desk scattered in his wake. Show off, she muttered, though her lips curved in an appreciative smile as she activated her own teleportation spell. Downtown Bellwood trembled under repeated impacts as Naruto arrived on the scene, distinctive architecture of Earth buildings now marred by smoke and structural damage. Civilians ran in panic from the epicenter of destruction, a central plaza where 3 figures moved with destructive purpose. Naruto perched atop a streetlight, assessing the situation with a strategist's eye. The dimensional interlopers weren't difficult to identify, unlike the human bystanders fleeing the area. These beings stood over 8 feet tall with gray-green skin and bony protrusions extending from their joints. They wore minimal armor made from materials Naruto couldn't identify, and each carried weapons that pulsed with energy similar to the dimensional rifts. Gwen, you seeing this? He spoke into his communicator, knowing her equipment would provide visual feedback. Crystal clear, her voice replied in his ear. Krolotines, interdimensional mercenaries. They're usually hired muscle, not independent operators. So someone sent them, Naruto concluded, watching as one of the aliens blasted a storefront with its weapon, methodically destroying everything in sight. Exactly. They're searching for something, or someone. Naruto didn't need exceptional intuition to guess what, or who, they might be looking for. The Chaquetrix. Probably, Gwen confirmed. Vexus works fast. I've contained 2 smaller breaches up north, but these guys will cause serious collateral damage if not stopped quickly. On it. Naruto ended the transmission and focused on the task at hand. The Krolotines had formed a search pattern, systematically destroying buildings while scanning the debris with handheld devices. Their movements suggested military training, organized and efficient despite the chaos they created. Naruto formed a quick plan. 3 opponents, unknown capabilities but clearly dangerous. Direct confrontation would risk further civilian casualties and property damage. Better to separate them, deal with each individually, and minimize collateral effects. He created 3 shadow clones, each already suffused with a hint of the golden Saiyan energy he was learning to control. Without verbal communication, a tactical advantage of the shadow clone technique, they split up to execute his strategy. The first clone dropped directly into the path of the nearest Krolotine, landing with deliberately heavy impact to draw its attention. Looking for me, the clone called out, standing tall amidst the rubble. The alien's head swiveled toward him, red eyes narrowing beneath the heavy brow. It raised its scanning device, which emitted a series of beeps that grew more rapid as it focused on the Chaquetrix visible on the clone's wrist. Target acquired, it growled, its voice guttural and harsh. Surrender the dimensional device or be terminated. How about option 3? The clone suggested, before launching a kunai that struck the scanner with pinpoint accuracy, shattering it in the alien's hand. The Krolotine roared in anger, raising its energy weapon. The clone was already moving, leading the mercenary away from the central plaza and toward an empty construction site where collateral damage would be minimized. Meanwhile, the second clone employed a different approach with another Krolotine, using transformation jutsu to appear as a frightened civilian running past. When the alien dismissed the seemingly harmless human, the disguised clone planted an explosive tag on its back armor before disappearing into an alleyway. The subsequent detonation didn't seriously injure the tough-skinned mercenary, but it certainly captured its undivided attention and fury. The original Naruto focused on the third Krolotine, clearly the leader based on its more elaborate armor and commanding gestures. This one required a more direct approach, drawing on the Saiyan power that had become more accessible after the morning's training session. Naruto dropped from his perch, landing just behind the alien with enhanced speed. Interdimensional travel advisory, he announced casually. Bellwood's closed for destructive tourism today. The Krolotine commander turned with surprising agility for its bulk, weapon already charging. The Chaquetrix bearer, it hissed, displaying sharper intelligence than its subordinates. Vexus offers generous terms for your surrender. Your physical body need not be undamaged for the device to be harvested. Charming recruitment pitch, Naruto replied, circling slowly to keep the alien's attention fixed on him rather than the fleeing civilians. But I'll pass. The commander fired its weapon, not the destructive blast Naruto expected, but a specialized net composed of shimmering energy strands. Naruto dodged sideways, the Saiyan reflexes enhancing his already exceptional speed, but the net tracked his movement, adjusting its trajectory midair. Interesting. Targeting technology, not just brute force weapons. Rather than continuing to evade, Naruto switched tactics, drawing a kunai and channeling chakra through it. As the net descended, he slashed upward. The chakra-enhanced blade disrupting the energy pattern and causing the net to dissolve into harmless sparks. The Krolotine commander clicked something in its native language, surprise, perhaps, or tactical reassessment. It tapped controls on its armor, and components shifted, revealing additional weapons emerging from concealed compartments. Chaquetrix technology detected, it stated flatly. Adjusting containment parameters. Recommend you minimize resistance to avoid permanent neural damage. I recommend you leave this dimension while you still can, Naruto countered, calling more of the Saiyan energy to the surface. The golden aura manifested around him, more controlled than before but still volatile, responding to his rising combat instincts. Through his clone connections, Naruto knew the other two Krolotines were now fully engaged in separate locations, one battling his clone in the construction site, the other hunting the second clone through a series of narrow alleys. The divide and conquer strategy was working, preventing them from combining their efforts against him. The commander assessed the golden aura with clinical detachment. Saiyan energy signature detected. Integration at approximately 49% capacity. Suboptimal but noteworthy. It adjusted settings on its weapons again, increasing containment strength. It fired multiple projectiles simultaneously. Not energy nets this time but specialized darts that curved through the air with unnatural precision. Naruto deflected most with a kunai in each hand, moving with fluid grace enhanced by the Saiyan power. But one dart penetrated his defense, grazing his shoulder. Immediate numbness spread from the contact point, his left arm hanging suddenly heavy and unresponsive. Some kind of neural disruptor or paralytic agent. Partial neutralization achieved, the Krolotine noted with cold satisfaction. Surrender is recommended to avoid permanent damage. Naruto's response was to channel chakra through his system, accelerating his metabolism to combat the paralytic effect. At the same time, he drew more deeply on the Saiyan template, feeling the golden energy respond to his determination. You know what's fascinating about Saiyan biology? He asked conversationally, buying time as feeling returned to his arm. According to my friend, they actually grow stronger when injured or facing adversity. The commander paused, red eyes narrowing in what might have been concern. So really, Naruto continued, the golden aura intensifying around him, you're just making me stronger with each attack. Whether this was strictly true remained uncertain. Naruto was still learning the capabilities and limitations of the Saiyan template, but the psychological impact on his opponent was immediate and satisfying. The Krolotine took a half step back, reassessing. Through his clone connections, Naruto received a sudden influx of battle information. His first clone had successfully incapacitated its opponent at the construction site, using the environment to trap the alien beneath fallen scaffolding. The second clone was still engaged but had managed to disarm its pursuer and was maintaining a hit-and-run strategy to wear it down. Time to end this, then. Naruto focused on the golden energy flowing through him, remembering what Gwen had mentioned about Saiyans being capable of energy projection. If his own chakra could be shaped into a Rasengan, perhaps this power could be directed similarly. Concentrating, he extended his right hand, palm outward toward the Krolotine commander. The golden energy responded, gathering at his palm in a concentrated sphere. Unlike chakra, which required specific molding and manipulation, the Saiyan power seemed almost eager to be projected outward, requiring more restraint than encouragement. Last chance to retreat, Naruto offered, the glowing sphere growing more intense with each passing second. The commander's response was to activate a personal shield, energy field shimmering into existence around its body. Primitive energy manipulation, it dismissed. Ineffective against adaptive shielding. We'll see. Naruto released the gathered energy, not in a wild blast but in a controlled beam that struck the shield directly. For a moment, it seemed the Krolotine's confidence was justified as the shield absorbed the attack. Then cracks appeared in the energy field, spreading rapidly as the golden beam maintained continuous pressure rather than dissipating after impact. The commander's eyes widened in a new alarm as its supposedly superior technology failed against the sustained energy projection. With a sound like shattering glass, the shield collapsed completely, and the remaining energy sent alien flying backward through the wall of a partially destroyed building. Naruto approached cautiously, the golden aura still surrounding him but diminished as he regained control. Through the dust and debris, he found the Krolotine commander attempting to activate a device on its wrist, likely an emergency extraction or communication tool. A well-aimed kunai knocked the device from the alien's hand before it could complete the sequence. "Now then," Naruto said, standing over the downed mercenary, "let's talk about who sent you and what exactly they want with the Chaquetrix." The Krolotine commander glared up at him with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. Information was compartmentalized. "We were contracted to locate and acquire, not analyze." Contracted by Vexus. The alien's silence was confirmation enough. "How did you track me?" Naruto pressed. The dimensional jump should have been untraceable. After a calculating pause, the commander replied, "The device emits a unique quantum signature when templates are activated. Dimensional scouts detected it during your battle at the anchor point. Useful information." Naruto filed it away for later discussion with Gwen. "Tell your employer that the Chaquetrix stays with me," Naruto stated firmly. "And the next time he sends hunters, they'd better be prepared for something stronger than nets and paralytic darts." The commander's expression remained impassive, but Naruto sensed a shift in its demeanor, a reassessment based on the outcome of their confrontation. "Message received," it acknowledged finally. "Request permission to collect my unit and withdraw." Naruto considered this. The Krolotines had caused significant property damage but had seemingly avoided targeting civilians directly. Their mission had been acquisition, not extermination. Showing mercy might yield benefits later, particularly in terms of information flowing through mercenary networks. "Granted," he decided, "on condition that you don't return to this dimension." The commander inclined its head in what appeared to be a gesture of formal agreement. "Acceptable terms. The contract parameters allow for tactical withdrawal when target demonstrates unexpected capabilities." Naruto stepped back, allowing the alien to stand. Through his clone connections, he directed the others to release their opponents similarly, maintaining vigilance but permitting withdrawal. Within minutes, the three Krolotines had regrouped in the central plaza. The commander activated a new device, presumably a backup extraction mechanism, and the IR around them shimmered with dimensional energy. Without further communication, they vanished, presumably returning to whatever world they called home. As the last traces of the dimensional portal faded, Naruto released his shadow clones, absorbing their experiences and knowledge. The sudden influx of information and fatigue caused him to stagger slightly as the golden aura finally dissipated completely. "That's going to take some getting used to," he muttered, rolling his shoulders to work out the phantom soreness from his clone's battles. "Impressive work," came Gwen's voice, both through the communicator and from behind him. Naruto turned to find her approaching, a shimmer of magenta energy fading from around her as her transportation spell completed. Her clothing showed signs of her own battles, smudges of something that might have been dimensional residue, and a tear in her sleeve that exposed a minor scrape beneath. "You okay?" he asked, nodding toward the injury. "Just a scratch," she dismissed, examining the destruction around them. "Looks like you handled your three without too much collateral damage. Nice job with the controlled energy projection, by the way. Most people take months to achieve that level of precision with new powers." "I've had practice with similar techniques," Naruto explained modestly. "Besides, I had good motivation. Hard to miss when buildings and civilians are at stake." Gwen's expression softened slightly. "That kind of thinking is exactly why the Chaquetrix bonded with you in the first place. The device has some level of sentience. It chooses bearers compatible with its purpose." "Which is what, exactly?" "No one's explained that part yet." Before Gwen could answer, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Emergency respawn. DERs were finally arriving at the scene of destruction. "Let's continue this conversation somewhere less conspicuous," she suggested, nodding toward a side street. "My team will handle the cleanup and explanations here." They retreated to a quiet cafe several blocks from the battle zone, selecting an outdoor table with good sightlines in all directions, a security habit they apparently shared. AF. Chair ordering drinks neither of them particularly wanted but which justified their table occupation. Gwen activated a small device that created a privacy field around them. Sound dampening, she explained. We can talk freely without being overheard. Naruto nodded, appreciating the precaution. So, about the Chaquetrix's purpose. Gwen leaned forward, keeping her voice low despite the privacy field. Based on what I've been able to translate from the data it shared with my systems, the Chaquetrix was created by beings called the Architects, interdimensional entities that helped establish boundaries between realities during the early formation of the multiverse. Like the dimensional guardians you mentioned before. Similar but different. The guardians maintain the boundaries, the architects created them. Think of it as architects designing a building versus security guards protecting it after construction. Naruto nodded, following the analogy. And this device was their creation. For what purpose? Emergency intervention, Gwen explained. The multiverse isn't static. It grows, changes, sometimes experiences catastrophic events. The Chaquetrix was designed as a tool that could adapt to unforeseen crises by sampling the most powerful aspects of various dimensions and combining them in a single bearer. A multiversal first responder, Naruto summarized thoughtfully. But why choose a human? Surely there are more powerful beings that could wield it more effectively. Gwen smiled, as if he'd asked exactly the right question. That's the brilliant part of its design. The Chaquetrix doesn't need the most powerful being as its bearer, it needs the most adaptable one. Humans, particularly those with already flexible energy systems like yours, can integrate say power templates without being overwhelmed by any single aspect. Like how I can use Sage Mode and Kurama's chakra without losing myself to either, Naruto mused, understanding dawning. Exactly. Most higher beings are too specialized, too defined by their own specific power signature. They can't integrate other forms without conflict. Gwen sipped her coffee, grimacing slightly at its bitterness. From what I can tell, the device was never meant to remain with a single bearer permanently. It finds someone suitable during crisis periods, integrates the necessary templates to address the specific threat. Then moves on once stability is restored. So it'll detach once we fix the dimensional problems. Naruto glanced at the device on his wrist, emotions surprisingly mixed about this prospect. That's my theory, yes. Gwen studied him with perceptive green eyes. Does that bother you? The temporary nature of the power? Naruto considered her question seriously. I'm not sure, he admitted finally. I've always gained strength to protect others, not for its own sake. If the Chaquetrix moves on after the crisis is resolved, that seems right. But you're starting to feel connected to it, Gwen finished for him. The templates aren't just abilities, they're aspects of other beings, other perspectives and experiences. They're becoming part of you. Yeah, Naruto agreed, impressed by her insight. It's strange. I can feel the Saiyan template affecting not just my power but my instincts, my emotional responses. Earlier today, during the battle, I felt an exhilaration in combat that wasn't entirely my own. Integration goes both ways, Gwen explained. The templates influence you, but your core personality also shapes how they manifest. A different bearer might express Saiyan abilities through rage and destruction, but you channeled them through protection and precision. Their conversation paused as a new customer entered the cafe, both of them instinctive. Why assessing the newcomer before relaxing when they determined it was just an ordinary civilian? This shared vigilance, developed through years of their respective experiences, created an unspoken understanding between them. The Krolatine commander mentioned something interesting, Naruto said, returning to their discussion. Apparently, the Chaquetrix emits a unique quantum signature when its templates activate. That's how they tracked me. Gwen frowned. That complicates things. If Vexus can detect template activation across dimensions, limiting your use of those powers might be necessary for stealth operations. Or we could use it to our advantage, Naruto suggested. Create false activations as distractions while we work on stabilizing more anchor points. Gwen's eyes lit up at the tactical thinking. That's actually brilliant. We could program decoy devices to emit similar signatures at different locations. She pulled out her tablet, making quick notes. I'll need to analyze the exact frequency pattern, but with some modifications to standard quantum beacons. She trailed off, already deep in technical planning. Naruto watched her with growing appreciation, not just for her intelligence but for the seamless way she integrated magical knowledge with scientific understanding. In his world, such disciplines remained largely separate. Technologists rarely explored chakra theory, while jutsu specialists often ignored technological innovations. The Chaquetrix suddenly beeped, drawing both their attention. Its display illuminated with new information scrolling too quickly for Naruto to read. Dimensional anomaly detected, the mechanical voice announced. Unknown entity traversing damaged barrier. Location: Harbor District, Pier 7. Caution advised. Entity POW. Signature exceeds standard classification parameters. Gwen was already on her feet, the privacy field deactivating as she gathered her things. That doesn't sound good. The harbor is mostly industrial, minimal civilian presence. At least. Naruto stood as well, leaving payment for their untouched drinks on the table. Another mercenary group, you think? Power signature exceeding standard parameters suggests something worse. Gwen replied grimly. Most dimensional travelers register within established classification systems. Anything outside those parameters is either extremely powerful or completely unknown. Either way, not something we want running around unchecked, Naruto concluded. He glanced at the Chaquetrix, noting that all three template indicators were pulsing more rapidly now, as if sensing the approaching confrontation. How do we get to the harbor? My teleportation spell can get us within a quarter mile, but the anomaly might interfere with precise targeting. Gwen was already tracing magical sigils in the air, preparing the transportation magic. We'll need to approach the final distance conventionally to assess the situation. Naruto nodded his agreement. Lead the way. Gwen completed the spell, magenta energy enveloping them both. The world dissolved around them, reconstructing seconds later into an entirely different location, a rooftop overlooking Bellwood's sprawling harbor complex. In the distance, massive shipping containers created a labyrinthine landscape of metal and machinery, while cranes stood like industrial sentinels against the midday sky. Pier 7 should be that way. Gwen pointed toward the northeastern section of the harbor. Even from this distance, they could see unusual atmospheric distortions, the air itself seeming to warp and bend around a central point near a cargo loading area. Naruto enhanced his vision with a touch of chakra, focusing on the distortion. I see movement inside the anomaly. Something's definitely coming through. We should. Gwen began, then stopped abruptly as her communication device activated, projecting a small holographic image of a stern-faced man in what appeared to be a uniform. Magister Tennyson. The figure addressed her formally. We're detecting a Class 9 dimensional incursion at your location. Plumber containment teams are en route, ETA 12 minutes. Please confirm your status. Acknowledged. Magister Gilhul, Gwen replied, her tone shifting to something more professional. I'm on site with a consultant. We're conducting initial assessment before your teams arrive. The man's expression remained impassive, though his eyes flicked briefly to Naruto with evident curiosity. Understood. Be advised that dimensional readings suggest a hunter-class entity. Extreme caution is recommended. Backup is authorized if required. Appreciated, but we'll manage until your teams arrive, Gwen assured him, before ending the transmission. She turned to Naruto with an apologetic expression. Sorry about that. The plumbers are this dimension's interstellar law enforcement. They're good at their jobs, but they can be bureaucratic about interdimensional matters. I understand, Naruto replied, familiar with the occasional friction between field operatives and command structures. What's a Class 9 incursion? Highly dangerous, Gwen explained as they began, making their way across the rooftops toward Pier 7. The classification system ranges from 1 to 10, with 10 being potentially apocalyptic. A Class 9 typically indicates a powerful predatory entity capable of causing massive destruction. And Hunter class. It means the entity isn't just wandering through by accident, it's actively seeking something. Gwen's expression grew more serious. Or someone. They traversed the final distance in silence, moving with practiced stealth despite their haste. As they approached Pier 7, the dimensional distortion became increasingly pronounced. Reality. itself seeming to fold and unfold around a central point like origami manipulated by invisible hands. From their vantage point atop a warehouse overlooking the loading area, they observed as the distortion reached a critical point. Space tore open in a jagged wound of light and darkness, the dimensional barrier parting to allow passage from beyond. A figure emerged, humanoid but clearly not human. Standing over 7 feet tall with a lithe, predatory build, its body appeared to be composed of overlapping plates of organic armor in shades of blue and black. Its face was partially concealed behind a bone-white mask with glowing crimson eyes that surveyed its surroundings with calculated precision. Most distinctive, however, were the weapons it carried, twin curved blades that pulsed with energy matching the dimensional tier from which it had emerged. These weren't simple metal weapons but conduits for power that distorted the very air around them. "Dimensional Hunter," Gwen whispered, recognition and concern evident in her voice. "They're specialized assassins that can track targets across realities. Extremely rare and incredibly dangerous. Let me guess, it's here for the Chaquetrix," Naruto deduced grimly. "Almost certainly," Gwen agreed. "But hunters don't work for just anyone, they're particular about their contracts and obscenely expensive to hire. Vexus must be committing significant resources to this pursuit." As if hearing their whispered conversation despite the considerable distance, the hunter's head turned in their direction. Its crimson gaze locked unerringly on their position, focused with predatory intensity. "Found," it stated in a voice like metal scraping against stone, the single word carrying clearly across the intervening space. "Chaquetrix bearer. Surrender or perish." Naruto and Gwen exchanged glances. "So much for the stealth approach. Any tactical advice before we engage?" Naruto asked quietly, already gathering chakra in preparation for combat. "They're tactically brilliant and nearly impossible to surprise," Gwen replied, magical energy beginning to coalesce around her hands. "Their weapons can cut through dimensional barriers, which means conventional defenses probably won't hold. And they never, ever give up once contracted. So we need to be unpredictable, use unconventional defenses, and aim for incapacitation rather than retreat," Naruto summarized. A strategy already forming in his mind. "Works for me." Before Gwen could respond, the hunter moved, not toward them as expected but in a blindingly fast lateral dash. That positioned it beside a massive shipping container. With a single sweep of its dimensional blade, it sliced through the reinforced metal as if it were paper, sending the multi-ton container toppling toward a group of dock workers who had frozen in terror at its appearance. "Civilians!" Gwen shouted, already casting a spell to try to halt the container's fall. Naruto reacted instantly, the Elden Saiyan aura flaring to life around him as he launched himself from the rooftop. Moving with enhanced speed, he intercepted the falling container, bracing himself beneath its immense weight. Muscles strained against the crushing mass, the Saiyan strength allowing him to bear a burden that would have flattened an ordinary human. "Run!" he shouted to the workers, who needed no further encouragement to flee the area. Once the civilians were clear, Naruto shifted his grip and, with a tremendous effort, redirected the container's momentum to throw it harmlessly into the empty harbor waters. Massive splash sent water cascading over the pier, but the immediate danger to bystanders had passed. The tactical purpose of the hunter's action became clear immediately. It had separated Naruto from Gwen, isolating the Chaquetrix bearer while creating a distraction with civilian lives at stake. Now it moved with terrifying speed directly toward Naruto, dimensional blades leaving trails of disrupted reality in their wake. Naruto created 3 shadow clones to buy himself space, each darting in a different direction to confuse the hunter's targeting. The tactic seemed effective for approximately 2 seconds before the hunter adjusted, its crimson gaze tracking the real Naruto despite the identical duplicates. "Diversion ineffective," it stated flatly. "Life signature identified." It moved again, appearing almost instantaneously before Naruto, blades descending in a cross-cutting pattern designed to remove limbs rather than kill outright. The message was clear, it wanted the Chaquetrix intact, not necessarily its bearer. Naruto narrowly avoided dismemberment, the Saiyan reflexes allowing him to twist away from the main force of the attack. Even so, one blade grazed his shoulder, cutting not just through his jacket and skin but seemingly through the dimensional integrity of his body itself. Pain lanced through him unlike anything he'd experienced before, not just physical daw. Mage but a sensation of his very existence being partially severed from reality. Dimension-cutting blades, Gwen's voice came through his communicator. They don't just cut matter, they cut through T. He targets connection to this dimension. Don't let them make solid contact. Now she tells me, Naruto muttered, clutching his wounded shoulder as he put distance between himself and the hunter. The injury wasn't deep physically, but he could feel something wrong at an existential level, as if part of his shoulder temporarily existed in a different dimension from the rest of him. The hunter pressed its advantage, moving with fluid grace that belied its armored appearance. Each strike was precisely calculated, hurting Naruto toward the edge of the pier where his movement would be restricted. Time to change tactics. Instead of continuing to evade, Naruto drew directly on the Saiyan template, feeling its combat instincts rising to meet the challenge. The golden aura intensified around him, and he surprised the hunter by moving toward it rather than away, entering its guard before it could fully extend its blades for another strike. Unexpected approach, the hunter acknowledged, USTING its stance with mechanical precision. I'm full of surprises, Naruto replied, channeling the golden energy into his right fist as he delivered a blow directly to the hunter's midsection. The impact should have been devastating, the Saiyan strength behind it sufficient to shatter concrete, but the hunter's armor absorbed much of the force, distributing it across its body. Still, the blow drove it back several steps, creating the first opening in its relentless offense. Gwen seized the opportunity, having maneuvered to a flanking position during the exchange. Mercuta Vertitus, she called, unleashing a barrage of magenta energy discs that struck the hunter from behind. The magical attack seemed more effective than physical force, causing the hunter's armor to smolder where the discs made contact. It turned partially toward this new threat, crimson eyes narrowing behind its mask. Magical practitioner, it assessed. Secondary priority. That momentary division of attention was all Naruto needed. Drawing more deeply on the Saiyan template while simultaneously channeling Kurama's chakra, he created a hybrid technique, a Rasengan swirling with both golden Saiyan energy and the red-orange chakra of the Nine Tails. The hunter sensed the power buildup and pivoted back toward Naruto, dimensional blades raised defensively. Energy signature escalating, containment protocols activating. From its armor emerged smaller projectiles similar to the Krolodine darts from earlier, but significantly more advanced. These split mid-air into a web of energy designed to entangle and neutralize. Naruto had anticipated something similar after the earlier encounter. Rather than dodging, he thrust the hybrid Rasengan directly into the approaching energy web. The resulting collision created a localized dimensional shockwave that distorted space in a 10-foot radius, temporarily disrupting the hunter's weapons and sensory systems. Taking advantage of the momentary confusion, Naruto pressed forward, delivering a series of strikes enhanced by the Saiyan template's strength and speed. Each blow targeted joints and connection points in the hunter's armor, applying lessons learned from years of fighting opponents with specialized protections. The hunter adapted quickly, its reflexes matching Naruto's enhanced speed. What followed was a close-quarters exchange that would have been barely visible to normal human perception. Strikes, counters, and evasions executed at blinding velocity as both combatants continually adjusted to the other's capabilities. Through it all, Naruto felt the Saiyan aspects of the Chaquetrix responding to the challenge, power increasing with each exchange as if the template itself relished the worthy opponent. His movements became more fluid, strikes more precise, as if inherited muscle memory from countless battles fought by Saiyan warriors was integrating with his own combat experience. From her position, Gwen contributed strategically, not with direct attacks that might hit Naruto in the high-speed melee, but by casting containment spells that limited the hunter's movement options and occasionally disrupted its dimensional weapons when openings presented themselves. The hunter, recognizing the coordinated threat, suddenly disengaged from the close-quarters combat, leaping backward with inhuman agility. Its armor reconfigured, actions sliding and realigning into a more defensive formation. Assessment complete, it announced. Subject: Naruto Uzumaki. Species: human variant with multiple energy signatures. Threat level: significant. Chaquetrix integration: 52% Saiyan template, 24% Divine template, 36% Dragon template. Its crimson eyes narrowed. Adjustment required. Before either Naruto or Gwen could react to this clinical evaluation, the hunter plunged one of its dimensional blades directly into its own chest. Rather than self-destruction, this appeared to be an activation mechanism. The blade melded with the armor, sending pulses of energy throughout the hunter's form. "What's it doing?" Naruto asked, using the momentary pause to catch his breath. "I don't know," Gwen admitted, moving closer to his position. "But anything involving self-modification during combat can't be good." The hunter's form began to shift, armor plates reconfiguring and expanding as the dimensional energy from its blade was fully integrated. When the transformation completed seconds later, it stood nearly 10 feet tall, its armor now covered in pulsing circuitry-like patterns that matched the energy signature of its weapons. "Dimensional phase activated," it declared, voice deeper and more resonant. Containment parameters expanded. It moved again, but not as before. Rather than traversing the physical space between them, it seemed to step sideways through reality itself, appearing instantly beside Naruto without crossing the intervening distance. "Dimensional teleportation," Gwen warned, already casting a protective spell. "It's using the same principles as its blades to move through folded space." The warning came barely in time for Naruto to avoid a strike that would have severed his arm at the elbow. Even with his enhanced reflexes, the attack missed by millimeters, the dimensional blade passing close enough that he felt the same wrongness in reality that had accompanied his shoulder wound. This changed everything. If the hunter could effectively teleport at will, maintaining distance or predicting its movements became nearly impossible. Conventional combat tactics would be useless against an opponent that could simply ignore physical space. Inside his mindscape, Kurama stirred uneasily. "This creature fights outside normal physical laws, ***, the fox observed. "Your Saiyan abilities give you strength and speed, but they won't help against an opponent that can bypass space itself." "Then we need something that operates on the same principles," Naruto concluded, dodging another dime. Ensional strike by the narrowest of margins. The Chaquetrix pulsed on his wrist, the silver section corresponding to the divine template glowing more intensely than before. Naruto recalled what Gwen had said about the templates. Each represented different aspects of power across dimensions. If the Saiyan template granted physical prowess, perhaps the divine essence offered something more conceptual, more fundamental to the nature of reality itself. Making a split-second decision, Naruto mentally shifted his focus from the golden Saiyan energy to the silver divine essence that had remained largely dormant until now. The transition was jarring, like switching from a familiar language to one barely understood. Where the Saiyan template felt aggressive and physical, the divine essence was abstract and all-encompassing. Less a power source than a different way of perceiving reality itself. Silver light replaced the golden aura around him, and suddenly Naruto could see beyond normal percepti. Layers of reality stacked upon each other like pages in a book, dimensional frequencies resonating in patterns of cosmic significance. Most importantly, he could see the hunter's movements before T-Hey occurred, not as future events but as probability waves in the fabric of spacetime itself. When the hunter next attempted its dimensional teleportation, Naruto was waiting. As it stepped sideways through reality, he reached out with the divine essence and, incredibly, grasped the very concept of the hunter's movement, interrupting its translation between dimensional states. The result was spectacular and disorienting. The hunter materialized only partially, its form stretched between 2 points in space, momentarily trapped between dimensions. "Interference detected," it stated, voice distorted by its compromised state. "Divine template activation unexpected. Recalibrating. Now, Gwen," Naruto called, maintaining his conceptual hold on the hunter's dimensional state through sheer force of will. Gwen didn't hesitate. Hands weaving complex patterns, she chanted in an ancient language that seemed to resonate with the same frequency as the divine template Naruto was channeling. "Interdictum dementia captus," she called, completing the spell with a thrust of both palms toward the partially materialized hunter. Bands of magenta energy reinforced with silver divine essence wrapped around the hunter, binding not just its physical form but its dimensional presence as well. The magical containment field forced it fully into the current dimension, preventing further teleportation attempts. The hunter struggled against the constraints, its armor emitting pulses of counter-energy that threatened to disrupt the containment. Temporary obstruction, it assessed. Dimensional variance calculating. Escape trajectory plotting. It's already working to break free, Gwen warned, maintaining her spell with visible effort. This containment won't hold it for long. Naruto nodded, understanding the narrow window they had. The divine template had given him the means to interrupt the hunter's dimensional movement, but maintaining that connection while also planning a decisive strike was dividing his concentration dangerously. I need to hit it with something it can't phase away from, he reasoned aloud, something that affects it across all dimensional frequencies simultaneously. An idea formed. Dangerous and untested, but potentially effective. If he could combine aspects of all three templates simultaneously, Saiyan strength and energy projection, divine dimensional perception, and the dragon template, he hadn't yet actively drawn upon it, but if Gwen's information was correct, the dragon essence represented some of the most ancient and fundamental forces in the multiverse. Cover me, he told Gwen, beginning to gather energy for a combined technique unlike anything he'd attempted before. This might get unpredictable. When is it ever not with you? She replied with gallows humor, reinforcing her containment spell as the hunter continued its methodical effort to break free. Naruto closed his eyes, focusing inward. The golden Saiyan energy came easily now, responding to his call with eager intensity. The silver divine essence followed, more measured but equally powerful in its own way. The third aspect, however, the prismatic dragon template, resisted simple summoning. It felt ancient and deliberate, responding not to need or desire but to something deeper, more fundamental. It responds to will and wisdom, not just power, Kurama suggested. His own ancient nature resonating with the dragon essence. Not what you want to do, but what you understand must be done. Understanding clicked into place. Naruto shifted his mental approach, framing his intention not as a technique to defeat an enemy but as an act of dimensional correction, removing a disruptive element to restore proper balance. The dragon essence responded immediately. Prismatic energy flowing into his consciousness like a river-long dam suddenly finding release. The three energies coalesced within him: golden strength, silver perception, and prismatic fundamental force. Two observers. Naruto now stood encased in a swirling aura of all three colors, the energies forming patterns reminiscent of celestial phenomena as they integrated with his chakra network. Template synchronization at unprecedented levels, the Chaquetrix announced, its mechanical voice sounding almost impressed. Warning. Unstable energy configuration detected. Recommend controlled release. The hunter renewed its efforts to break free, sensing the imminent threat. Cracks appeared in Gwen's containment field, magenta energy flickering as dimensional distortions pressed against the magical barriers. Whatever you're doing, do it fast, Gwen called, sweat beading on her forehead from the strain of maintaining the increasingly unstable containment. Naruto opened his eyes, now glowing with the combined light of all three templates. He extended both hands toward the hunter, palms facing each other with a small space between them. Within that space, energy from all three sources began to compress and intertwine, forming a sphere no larger than an apple but containing power that caused the very air to distort around it. Trifold Convergence Sphere, he named it instinctively. The knowledge of how to shape and direct the combined energies flowing from the templates themselves. The hunter's crimson eyes fixed on the forming technique, its struggles becoming more asperate as it analyzed the energy signature. Unknown attack configuration. Threat level. Maximum. Evasive protocols activating. With a final surge of effort, it shattered Gwen's containment field. Dimensional energy exploding outward as it prepared to phase away from the impending attack. But Naruto had anticipated this. The divine template gave him perception across dimensional frequencies, allowing him to track the hunter's intended escape trajectory. As the hunter began its dimensional shift, Naruto adjusted his aim accordingly, not targeting where the hunter was but where it would be. Across all possible dimensional translations, he released the Trifold Convergence Sphere. The compressed energy shot forward, not as a beam or projectile but as a conceptual statement written in the language of reality itself. It passed through the space where the hunter had been and intercepted it mid-phase, striking with perfect timing at the precise moment of dimensional transition when its defenses were necessarily lowered. The impact transcended conventional physics. The sphere didn't explode so much as expand, enveloping the hunter in a manifestation of all three template energies simultaneously. Golden Saiyan power provided the raw destructive force, silver divine essence ensured the effect propagated across all dimensional frequencies the hunter might access, and prismatic Drago. Energy bound the effect into a cohesive whole that could not be escaped through dimensional manipulation. For a moment that seemed to stretch into infinity, the hunter was suspended within the expanding sphere of energy. Its form visible as a silhouette against the blinding light. Then reality reasserted itself with a thunderous crack, and the energy dispersed in a circular shockwave that rippled across the harbor, causing water to surge away from the epicenter before rushing back in a massive wave. Gwen barely managed to cast a protective barrier around them before the shockwave hit, the magical shield straining against forces that distorted the very space it enclosed. When the chaos finally subsided and the barrier dissolved, they found themselves standing on a partially destroyed pier. A perfect circular crater marking where the hunter had been. Of the hunter itself, there was no sign, not destroyed but completely removed from this dimensional frequency, banished back to its ori. Jin point by the combined power of the three templates. Naruto swayed on his feet, the tremendous energy expenditure taking its toll even on his considerable stamina. The tricolored aura faded, leaving him momentarily vulnerable as his body adjusted to the sudden power reduction. Gwen was at his side instantly, supporting him with a strength that belied her slender build. I don't even have words for what that was, she admitted, awe evident in her voice. I've seen Ben unleash some impressive aliens, but nothing quite like that. Not sure I could do it again anytime soon, Naruto admitted, his muscles trembling from the strain. Combining all three templates simultaneously was like trying to direct three rivers with my bare hands. But you did it, she pointed out, helping him move away from the damaged pier as sirens approached in the distance, the plumber containment teams finally arriving. You integrated powers that shouldn't even be compatible and created something entirely new. The Chaquetrix beeped on his wrist, its display showing new information. Template integration accelerating due to synchronized activation. Current status: Saiyan template at 63%, Divine template at 43%. Dragon template at 47%. Warning: dimensional resonance detected. Bearer physiology adapting to accommodate increased power flow. Is that good or bad? Naruto asked, glancing at Gwen. Both, potentially, she replied thoughtfully. Faster integration means you'll gain more complete access to each template's abilities sooner, but it also means that Chaquetrix is binding more deeply to your biological systems. She helped him sit on a relatively intact crate, examining him with both medical and magical concern. How do you feel? Naruto considered the question seriously, taking inventory of his physical and mental state. Exhausted but complete, somehow. Like pieces of myself I didn't know were missing or being filled in. Gwen's expression grew more serious. That's what worries me. The templates aren't just powers, they're aspects of other beings' fundamental natures. The more they integrate, the more they'll influence not just your abilities but potentially your personality, your instincts, your very identity. You think I'm losing myself to these templates? Naruto asked, genuine concern in his voice. Identity was something he'd struggled with his entire life. Container of the 9 tails, orphan of the 4th Hokage, child of prophecy. The thought of losing his hard-won sense of self to foreign influences was deeply troubling. Gwen considered her response carefully. I don't think it's that simple. It's more like synthesis than replacement. Your core personality seems to be guiding how the templates express themselves, rather than being overridden by them. She placed a reassuring hand on his arm. The Naruto who risked himself to save those dock workers is still the same person I met yesterday, just with new capabilities and perhaps some expanded perspectives. Her words were comforting, but Naruto couldn't completely dismiss his concerns. He'd need to maintain vigilant self-awareness as the integration proceeded, ensuring while he incorporated these new powers, he remained fundamentally himself. The conversation paused as a sleek, unmarked vehicle pulled up nearby, disgorging several individuals in specialized UNIFO. RMS, the plumbers Gwen had mentioned earlier. That's our cue to provide explanations, Gwen sighed, helping Naruto to his feet. Try to let me do most of the talking. Interdimensional incidents require specific diplomatic protocols. And these guys love their paperwork. Naruto nodded his agreement, content to observe how this dimension's authorities operated. Every piece of information about T's world might prove valuable in the challenges ahead. As they approached the plumber team, the Chaquetrix pulsed once more, a final message scrolling across its display. Warning. Dimensional Hunter. Defeat registered across multiversal frequencies. Probability of escalated response from hostile entities, 94.3%. Recommend preparation for increased dimensional instability and coordinated opposition. Naruto and Gwen exchanged grim looks. They had won this battle decisively, but the war for multiversal stability was clearly just beginning. Hours later, after exhaustive debriefings and medical examinations by the plumber medical staff, Naruto and Gwen finally returned to her laboratory. The sun had long since set, the city lights visible through the windows creating a tapestry of illumination against the night sky. Naruto stood before those windows, gazing out at this world so different from his own. Skyscrapers of glass and steel replaced the more modest structures of Konoha, while the vehicles moved along carefully defined roadways instead of shinobi traversing rooftops. Different, yet in many ways familiar, people living their lives, building connections, finding meaning in their existence. Credit for your thoughts. Gwen's voice came from behind him as she entered with 2 steaming mugs. We use coins in my world, but the expression is similar, Naruto replied with a tired smile, accepting the offered beverage. The aroma identified it as tea rather than coffee, a thoughtful choice given the late hour. The plumbers, dimensional technicians confirmed what we already suspected, Gwen informed him. Joining him at the window. The barriers between dimensions are continuing to weaken, and our encounter with the hunter actually accelerated the process in some areas. Because of the energy we used to defeat it. Quote, partially that, but also because of what it was, Gwen explained. Dimensional hunters are specialized beings that exist partially between realities. When one is forcibly ejected from a dimension, it creates ripples across the nearby dimensional fabric, like throwing a stone into a still pond. Naruto sipped his tea, appreciating its subtle flavor. So Ave made things worse while trying to make them better. Welcome to interdimensional crisis management, Gwen replied with a wry smile. Every solution creates new problems. The key is staying ahead of the cascade effect. She gestured to the main console where multiple displays showed dimensional mapping data. The good news is that we've identified 3 more anchor points that should be accessible with our current capabilities. If we can stabilize those, it might counterbalance the damage from today's encounters. Naruto nodded thoughtfully, his strategic mind already considering approaches and contingencies. We should prioritize the most vulnerable points first, minimize travel between interventions to reduce our dimensional footprint. My thoughts exactly, Gwen agreed. Though, there's another factor we need to consider. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. The plumbers' intelligence division intercepted communications between several known associates of the Convergence cult. They're mobilizing resources on an unprecedented scale. Because of the Chaquetrix. Not just that, they see the weakening dimensional barriers as an opportunity, a chance to advance their agenda of forcing all realities to converge into a single dimension they can control. Gwen's expression grew more serious. They've been working toward this for centuries, but always lacked the necessary catalyst. Now, between Vexus's actions and the Chaquetrix's activation, they have exactly what they need. So we're not just fighting to repair damage, we're in a race against people actively trying to make it worse. Naruto summarized grimly. Exactly. And they have resources across multiple dimensions, followers who believe they're working toward a divine purpose. Gwen set down her mug, moving to the console to bring up additional information. The cult's philosophy holds that the multiverse itself is a cosmic error, that originally all existence was united in a single perfect reality before some cataclysm shattered it into countless imperfect fragments. And they think they can restore this supposed perfect state. Naruto asked skeptically. They don't just think it. They've been working methodically toward it for generations. Collecting artifacts, positioning operatives in key dimensional nexus points, researching ancient methods of barrier manipulation. Gwen brought up an image of a symbol, a complex geometric pattern that resembled a shattered circle being reformed. This is their emblem. It appears throughout history across multiple dimensions, always associated with dimensional disturbances. Naruto studied the symbol, committing it to memory. Did they have a leader? Many over the centuries, but current intelligence suggests their present hierarch is S. Someone called the architect. Not to be confused with the actual architects who created the Chaquetrix, Gwen clarified. Very little is known about this individual except that they possess exceptional dimensional manipulation abilities and apparently unprecedented longevity. The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from the laboratory's security system. Gwen checked the monitor and frowned slightly. Unscheduled visitor, she explained, activating additional security protocols with a few quick commands. Though not entirely unexpected, the laboratory's main entrance slid open to reveal a woman Naruto hadn't seen before. Tall and athletic with dark skin and close-cropped hair streaked with vibrant blue, she wore what appeared to be specialized combat gear integrated with technological components beyond Naruto's understanding. Most noticeable was the array of weapons and devices attached to various harnesses across her body, a walking arsenal with a purpose. Despite her obvious combat readiness, she moved with casual confidence rather than aggression, hands visible and posture relaxed as she entered the laboratory. Tennyson, she greeted Gwen with a nod that conveyed respect without deference. Your cousins mentioned you'd adopted another stray. Her gaze shifted to Naruto, sharp eyes noting the Chaquetrix on his wrist with immediate recognition. Though this one seems more interesting than most. Yuna, Gwen acknowledged, her tone friendly but guarded. I should have expected Grandpa Max would alert you to the situation. When an unregistered dimensional device activates and nearly punches a hole through the fabric of reality. Yeah, that tends to get my attention. The newcomer, Yuna, approached Naruto directly, extending a hand in greeting. Yuna Nazari, interdimensional acquisition specialist. Some people call me a bounty hunter. Others call me a thief. I prefer specialized procurement expert. Naruto accepted the handshake, noting the calluses ND subtle scarring that spoke of extensive combat experience. Naruto Uzumaki, Jonin of Konohagakure. Some people call me a knucklehead. Others call me a hero. I prefer shinobi. A smile quirked the corner of Yuna's mouth. I like this one, Gwen. Got a sense of humor despite wearing a multiversal catastrophe on his wrist. The Chaquetrix isn't a catastrophe, Gwen corrected, though without heat. It's a tool designed for dimensional maintenance and crisis response. Semantics, Yuna dismissed, circling Naruto with undisguised curiosity. A hammer is a tool until someone uses it to bash in a skull. That device has been on more most wanted lists across the multiverse than any other artifact in recorded history. You've encountered it before? Naruto asked, intrigued by this potential source of information. Not directly, but I've chased rumors for years. Yuna completed her circuit, coming to stand before him again. Her gaze was analytical but not hostile. Most dimensional TECH collectors would sell their ancestral dimensions for a chance to study it. Vexus would do considerably worse to possess it. We've met, Naruto confirmed grimly. So I heard. You kicked him back, K to his pocket dimension and then banished one of his hunters today. Yuna sounded genuinely impressed. Not bad for someone who's had the device less than 48 hours. I've had good help, Naruto replied, nodding toward Gwen. Always the diplomat, Yuna observed with a knowing smile. But flattery won't distract me from my purpose here. She turned to Gwen. Max Tennyson contracted me to provide specialized assistance in tracking dimensional incursions related to this situation. He seems to think my particular skill set might be useful. And that skill set would be? Naruto inquired. I hunt things across dimensions. Yuna explained simply. Technology, artifacts, occasionally people with prices on their heads. I know the pathways between worlds better than almost anyone alive. And I've had extensive dealings with the Convergence cult in the past. Not always friendly dealings, I imagine, Gwen interjected. Yuna's expression hardened momentarily. Let's just say we have a complicated history. They've tried to recruit me, I've stolen from them. They've tried to kill me, I've disrupted their operations. The usual adversarial relationship. And now you want to help us against them? Naruto asked, natural caution tempering his response. In his world, former adversaries offering assistance often came with hidden agendas. Yuna met his skeptical gaze directly. I want to prevent multiversal collapse. Which happens to align with your interests at the moment. Besides, she added with a casual shrug, the plumbers pay well for specialized consultation, and Max Nison's one of the few interdimensional authorities I actually respect. Before the conversation could continue, the Chaquetrix suddenly activated, its display illuminating with urgent notifications. Multiple dimensional breaches detected, it announced. Anchor point destabilization in progress. Immediate intervention required. Maps appeared on the laboratory's main screens, showing 3D. Distinct locations across the globe where dimensional barriers were actively degrading. That's not random deterioration, Yuna observed, immediately moving to examine the data more closely. Those are targeted strikes. Someone's deliberately attacking the anchor points. The convergence cult, Gwen concluded grimly. They're accelerating their timetable. We need to split up, Naruto suggested, already thinking tactically. One person for each anchor point. Exactly what they want, Yuna countered. Divide our forces, reduce our effectiveness. Classic strategy. But we don't have a choice, Gwen pointed out. If all 3 anchor points fail simultaneously, the dimensional cascade would be catastrophic. The 3 of them exchanged looks, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible situation and the necessity of immediate action. I can provide transportation to any of the locations, Yuna offered, indicating a device on her wrist that resembled a more specialized version of Gwen's teleportation technology. My dimensional jumper is calibrated for precision insertions, even in unstable conditions. I'll take the anchor point in the Arctic, Gwen decided, already gathering specialized equipment. My magic works better in environments with minimal technological interference. I'll handle the one in the Amazon basin, Yuna volunteered. I've got contacts in that region who might provide useful backup. Which leaves the underwater anchor point in the Pacific for me, Naruto concluded, glancing at the location data on the screen. Conveniently the most physically challenging environment. Can you handle aquatic conditions? Yuna asked, genuine concern rather than doubt in her voice. Naruto considered the question. His water-walking technique would be of limited use in deep ocean conditions. But perhaps the templates could offer alternatives. The Chaquetrix will adapt, he stated with more confidence than he truly felt. It hasn't let me down so far. Optimism. Adorable, Yuna remarked with a sardonic smile. But take this anyway. She removed a small device from one of her many pouches and handed it to him. Portable breathing apparatus. Works to a depth of 2,000 meters. Limited duration. About 3 hours, but better than drowning while saving the multiverse. Naruto accepted the device gratefully. Thanks. Don't mention it. Seriously. Don't, I have a reputation to maintain. Yuna began programming coordinates into her dimensional jumper. We should move quickly. Based on these deterioration rates, we have less than 2 hours before critical failure. Gwen finished gathering her equipment, including several spell components specific to stabilization rituals. We'll rendezvous back here after securing our respective anchor points. If any of us encounters resistance beyond what we can handle alone, don't hesitate to call for extraction. Naruto nodded his agreement, though privately he resolved to complete his mission regardless of opposition. The Saiyan template's influence, perhaps, but also his own deeply ingrained shinobi determination. Ready? Yuna asked, final preparations complete. At their nods, she activated her dimensional jumper. Coordinates locked, initiating targeted teleportation in 3, 2, 1. The world dissolved around them in a cascade of light, each of them bound for a different corner of the globe, and whatever challenges awaited there. As Naruto felt himself being transported toward the Pacific anchor point, the Chaquetrix pulsed with anticipation, all 3 template indicators glowing more intensely than before. Whatever awaited him beneath the ocean surface, he would face it with the combined power of 3 extraordinary templates and his own indomitable will. The multiverse itself hung in the balance, and retreat was not an option. Chapter 2 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.